Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to Duck Talks number 49. 49, wow, that's a pretty huge number to be honest. So I guess this episode will last 40, 45, 50 minutes depending on how long all the subjects that I have here listed will take. And I try to use timestamps, at least in the video, and yeah, let's see how it goes. So for the first topic will be the ship test of this weekend, followed quickly up by the chat gameplay discussion. Then also kind of the discussion about German tanks get out of hand, get hot. And, I answered with the Panzer IV F2 tank review. And by the time of me recording and editing the Duck Talks, I have not released it yet. So the Monday where I'm recording this, I'm actually not aware of how you responded. The Panzer IV F2, I will come to this back in a moment, and also the big huge topic right in the middle. The Orange Doom left War Thunder and what he has left behind. Followed up with me becoming God of War and what I think about it and what is there left. And followed up by me being a little bit tired of playing War Thunder because of some reasons. And no, not meaning that I will leave War Thunder. And then we have to talk about the Italian tanks and some rework of auto-loading mechanisms within War Thunder. And especially at the end, obviously, questions from last week's Duck Talks. So, about the last weekend's ship test, well, I have to say I played just one game, and I couldn't play it anymore because there was absolutely no change whatsoever that I saw in that one game. I didn't see any notifications even in the announcement. It was just so... Yeah, we just switched the switch again and here you go, play ships like you did like 2 months ago, and no changes in a pre-beta. I mean, it's awfully silent all around War Thunder lately, isn't it? Like, there is no announcement, no dev block, and I will come to this in a moment. While this is kind of bit of awkward for me, let's put it that way, okay? So, I will come to this back in a moment. I mean, there is less and less even announcements of changes, and I just have played one. So if I missed anything, because I really couldn't be bothered with playing it, let me know in the comment section if I have missed anything since my last video, okay? Because I was so... Yeah, I had better things to do on the weekend than wasting my time on a test that is worth nothing from me as a player, okay? And I have no idea, again, what they're testing, but this is the same old story for like the last few videos that I made about it, the last few tests. So yeah, I'm kind of beginning to repeat myself, so time to move on to the next topic. So now we have to talk about chats and my video about chats. And initially the responses were always great. So a lot of you wanted to give me some little tips and tricks and what you think about chats and so forth. I also begin to like chats more and more. And there are two reasons for that. First of all, I don't play the bad chats anymore. Yeah, you play the good stuff, you have a greater experience, nothing wrong with the game, right? Yeah. Also, most of them are already upgraded. So when I had some spare gold needles and there was a 50% discount on the cost of the upgrades, I threw the golden eagles always at chats. To get the necessary upgrades for the British, the Hispanos, for the Americans, the flight performances. Same goes with the Soviets that actually require mostly the weapon upgrades and the engine power and so forth. Not very specifically mentioned here, but there is a lot of gold to be dumped into this chat hole. So with the F3D1, I had this phenomenally lucky game where I got like 5 kills, and it was reckless at the end. Nevertheless, it was rewarded with a double strike. So, or with 2 double strikes and 5 kills. So it was really nice. But I wouldn't have touched the plane if I would not have, if I wouldn't have given the Golden Eagles to upgrade it, because I think it's not competitive. It's not good at 8.0, unlike the G91. And people, in the comments actually said, yeah, it's way too good for 8.0. That is true. It is very good, and you can hold yourself against other 9.0s while not really, being on their level. So, and again, it's fully upgraded. And that has to do with the big gaps in chat. So you might be all aware of this. So when I play chats, it's almost like you just have a choice. Play a good chat or play a bad chat. And I'm not saying here about the armament, because the armament is what holds this plane a little bit back for the endurance purposes, or those sometimes guess shots or deflection shots, and when the plane rolls a little bit around, you don't have a lot of ammunition, you don't have a lot of guns, and while 50 cals are very strong, I know that, and I showed it in my gameplay, a lot of hits, a lot of crits and so forth. Not every match is going like that. So you have to put it in perspective. There is actually a feelable difference between the 650 cals and the 450 cals on the G91. So you have to keep that in mind. I will continue the journey when playing chats. I hope I, go here to make it entertaining for you, and to finally find into this branch that I refuse to really play for years and years and years, despite having all the vehicles, all the jets in the game, most of them halfway upgraded or even fully upgraded. And that brings me then also to the fact that not a lot of people watch them. Okay, I thought that a bigger part of my subscriber base, or also random parts of people on the internet, are interested in me, what I am going with chat gameplay. Okay, I'm not sure if people have given up on me playing chats after the 8.0 rant, which is still up to date, is still a thing that is a big problem within War Thunder, and renders so many chats just obsolete, despite them being not bad, because of the constant up tier and so forth. So I have no idea why people are not watching those videos. Am I just this tanker guy? Am I just this guy that plays tanks and has nothing to do with the Air Force because he's so bad and so forth? Or is it just, he's the prop guy and, no chats at all, and he doesn't like that and he has no skill whatsoever? Or is it just a few videos that I made? Is it just that I do not make enough videos to drag in people in watching them? So this is a very interesting question that I have no answer to. So also chats, I like playing some of them. I will continue doing so. One of the reasons being I have nothing else to do. Everything is upgraded. I will spade some lower tier vehicles to get my ultimate goal. From rank 1 to rank 4, everything has to be spaded. Rank 5 and 6, I don't really care about their upgrade status. I mean, it would be nice if everything is spaded, but that's literally a lifetime of work, to which we'll come back in a moment. The next topic is actually not a very nice topic. It is the discussion about the German tanks, and it began with me talking with Many Miles Away. You have seen my video so far. I'm wondering if Miles even, bothers to render his part and upload it. But nevertheless, we had a good talk of around about an hour, and we just mentioned all the problems that the Germans have. And the ultimate point of view was that, at with beginning of tier 3 and tier 4 in particular, even extending to tier 5, the Germans lack the good air support and the easy air support and the anti-CAS, so to speak, so to also defeat enemy CAS, because the German planes are just horrible at this battle rating. Bf-109s and Focke-Wulfs in particular. Whoever denies that, well, eventually it is somewhat possible to do it, but it's time consuming, and it's just possible in 1 versus 1 if there is an oblivious enemy and so forth. But in an actual 1 versus 1, the Germans do not have that many advantages. And again, it's not impossible. I've seen it being able to wipe out enemies, but just single ones. I've done it myself, but in my experience doing it myself, I also found out that American and British and also the French CAS is just simply better. Okay, and then funny enough, the Japanese CAS and also the Italian CAS is lacking a lot. Like, there is literally nothing that you can throw at the enemy. With some few exceptions, but throughout the battle ratings, to get yourself a good, reliable lineup to wipe out enemies in a fashion like the Americans or the Brits are doing it, even after the rocket adjustment, is just it's no content. And then there was also the response from certain parts of the community, and again I have to stress it out, because this is just, you see, I do War Thunder as a hobby. Okay, I do my real life stuff, and then I just sit myself in front of the PC, play the game, and tell you about my experiences. So if I say, okay, this tank is good, this tank is bad, this plane, I don't know, have to learn it a bit more, and then I don't make a video about it. But I play enough to realize, okay, this tank has so many advantages, and then you go into the stats, you actually get the comparison, and then you just try to translate that into gameplay, okay, or the other way around, okay, to interpret the gameplay with the stats and so forth. It's a back and forth, and I have done enough stat comparisons and just a collection of data of mine, with all the previous tank reviews, that I know what I'm talking about. At least I think so myself. But you always can be taught new things, you always can look at different things from a different perspective and so forth. And when I talked about this T-25 versus Tank X, which was effectively a comparison to the Tiger, then it was just, okay, look, T-25 and Tiger, very similar tanks. However, T-25 has many advantages because of the lineups, because of the support, the flanking support, the air support, and that it just trades off basically side armor for better turret rotation speed, and also a bit of a longer reload, with the gun being more or less than the same. Especially when it comes to the ammunition, you actually have a slight advantage there, technically. And the response was furious, from certain people, and again I had to delete certain comments. And throughout the 2 videos, when I was talking to Miles, when I was talking about the T-25 versus Tank X, I was called a fanatic, I was called a Nazi, I was called, just being completely blindly biased towards the Germans. And people claim, oh, I have a so-and-so kill to death ratio, so that is not, so there is no excuse for the average player to not have at least a kill to death ratio half of mine, and that would be still awesome. And I don't know why people are so bad playing the German tanks. You're missing the point. Okay, if there is such a huge population of bad tankers within War Thunder, why are they all playing the Germans? Where are all the good players? And I never got an answer to this question. Obviously, the competitive tankers, they just, in silence, look at the stats, look at the few games after a patch has dropped. They follow the flavor of the month. They don't give a shit about any balance in the game. They just want to drive the best tank, the best plane in the game, and just want to seal club it. And the higher the battle rating, the less guilt they feel, about seal clubbing. And when we had the story with the T29 and also the IS6 when they came out. Everybody, there was so many obvious cases where you shot the lower plate of the T29 and the shell did nothing. You shot the turret front and it didn't penetrate despite it should go through. I did test shootings and so forth, and still I was called a wereaboo. I should just shut up. There is nothing wrong with the game, nothing wrong with the tanks. So a part of the community is really, really salty. However, one of the responses had to do with the Panzer IV. And at first, it actually, which is now the next topic, now I'm talking about the tank review of the Panzer IV F2. There were people, amongst others, there was one specific comment that made me a little bit laugh. The Panzer IV F2 is totally and utterly overpowered. And why do I not mention this? And why do I not mention the Wirbelwind and the Ostwind and so forth? And they're totally overpowered at their battle rating. And then other comparisons were, because of the Panzer IV being so good and so forth and utterly overpowered. I really had to laugh about this. Then it's okay that the Tiger struggles a little bit, but there is again nothing wrong with the Tiger. All those various different comments. The fun fact was, I was actually curious, how good is the Panzer IV F2? And at this point in time, I have not released the Panzer IV tank review. Again, I'm recording this on Monday, and I will release the tank review tomorrow, so for you yesterday, as this will be probably being released at the day after. And I played a lot of games with the Panzer IV F2, and I got ace after ace after ace. I got so many big kill streaks, even double aces. And I thought to myself, well, this tank is really good, okay? And I made the gameplay before I actually went into the stats. But there were a lot of things that again have to point out to put it into perspective. Is the Panzer IV F2 overpowered? No. However, it's a very good all-round package. And you have to just think about certain things. This is a rather low-tier vehicle, battle rating 3.3. If I get an ace in this tank, it wouldn't be much of a surprise. And that is not arrogant. And please stay with me here, okay? Because you have to think about this. My Panzer IV F2 is completely upgraded, okay? It has every module that it can have. I have played all tanks throughout the nations, okay? And especially at this battle rating, I know what I'm talking about in comparison to the tanks that are compared it. The first German with the 75mm, the 1940 version of the T-34, and many more tanks. And yeah, the Panzer IV, with the exception of the penetration power of the APHE shell, has no real outstanding stats, okay? It's not the fastest, it's not the most maneuverable, it doesn't have the highest rate of fire, it hasn't the best armor, but the package is good, okay? It's still very usable. Also, I have the expert crew on it, which maybe not everybody does have, And then I'm just an experienced player throughout the battle ratings. I know the enemies. Also, game mechanics have changed, You now no longer ricochet just simply from the front plate of a T-34, like you did the years before. I think there was a game mechanic change over a year ago, with the 30% interaction rule, which is so important. This is why I mention it very often in my tank reviews. And this makes it possible that now the 75mm shell no longer ricochets from the front plate of a T-34, which in the past it did. And this just allows you to get in those snapshots and if not the one-shot kill, the disabling shot. And this is now the importance, because I looked through the entirety of my recordings. Sorry about this. And the one thing that I found out is I predict where the enemy is going. I have the side shots, and yes, the tank is good at doing this. But is it impossible to do the same thing with a T-34? Is it impossible to do the same with the Sherman? And I think, the Panzer IV has some trade-offs versus the Sherman and also the T-34, where they are a bit better. One is being better in the mobility department, and the other one has, funnily enough, better armor, and also a top-mounted 50 caliber machine gun, which you should not underestimate. And I think, I played also with the T-34 1940 a little bit, and also with the Sherman, and I thought to myself, well, I can do a lot of one-shot kills as well, because while those tanks have less firepower, they have higher burst charges, so you get more one-shots. And that means, with the Panzer IV, you also get a lot of one-shots, no doubt about that. But if you shoot at very specific parts of the tank, you just simply don't get this one shot that you would get with the T-34 1940 or the first Sherman, because of the high burst charges of their APHE shells. And, then also the Panzer IV is just the absolute sweet spot. After it doesn't get better. So, all the other tanks, they just don't have an increase in firepower or rate of fire or gun handling. In fact, it gets worse, and their mobility gets worse for an, in my opinion, insignificant gain of armor that in most cases is not worth it. I mean, compare the Panzer IV F2 and how it handles to the Panzer IV J, with the turret rotation speed, the mobility, the armor. It's not quite the same quality of package that you get, if you know what I'm talking about. And so, the second I got shot with the Panzer IV F2, I was literally disabled and dead, okay? So all the games that I played, in the overwhelming majority of cases, the second I got hit, it was over. So it's literally a glass cannon. And this is something that you must not forget about, okay? So, that's the end of this discussion, and I hope with the Panzer IV F2 tank review this settles, because those numbers are directly from the game, okay? And it's a good tank, but it's not totally overpowered like people claim. And now to the big topic that so many of you have waited for, which is apparent in the thumbnail, and that is the Orange Doom has left War Thunder. And I wanted to talk about this. Now, a lot of you are cheering, yes, Orange has left War Thunder, and a part of me is saying, well, I saw that coming. But on the other hand, it's not the clean victory, it's not something exceptionally good for the game and for the community. And Orange was always this for some people, this annoyance that they just talked about. But Orange also brought good ideas to War Thunder. Orange helped me in particular with the kickstart of my channel. He gave me a lot of tips and tricks how to YouTube. I had some very interesting talks again back on the Gentleman's Hangar with him, and I thank him for that, okay? He just has more experience with doing YouTube. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons why he left was just he never allowed himself to have a break, okay? He never just went away from the game for a few days or even for a week. And he just overplayed it, okay? And excessively. I will come to this in a moment, because this also affected a little bit me. And with him leaving War Thunder, he drags a lot of people with him. He said it himself months before he actually left. And when you have every tank, every plane in the game, and you have also spaded it and have achieved everything that there is important to achieve in your books, then he actually went around to make a free-to-play account, the Green Doom. And to be honest, nobody else has done this, to look at the game from a free-to-play aspect. And this is where Orange failed, because he just has looked so far at the lower tiers. And I'd wish he continued that journey up until the point that he gets to rank 4 to rank 5 and realizes how insanely difficult it is to come across huge amounts of silver lines. And I know what I'm talking about when sitting at around about 103 million silver lines and complaining about silver lines because I once had 125 million silver lines. I still have to play extra games in my planes to cover the costs of buying the tanks, of putting them into service, and also to use the necessary expert crew qualification. Okay, I think 1 or 2% of my tanks actually do have an ace qualification because I played them either so much or I outright purchased it, for special scientific seal clubbing. Amongst them I think is the Packwang. I don't think the Packwang. Yeah, but the Panzer IV F2 being amongst them, the Tiger 105 and also my E100. And for the later two I actually played so much. Okay, so with Orange leaving War Thunder, we actually lost the biggest Twitch streamer for War Thunder that does it on a regular basis. To be honest, Fly is also streaming and he might attract more people because he has a much wider audience, over 10 times what Orange has on the YouTube channel, just from this perspective. But, he does it very unregularly. Fly that is. And Orange tried to promote the competitive side of War Thunder. It's very funny that they actually left War Thunder because of that. And many things came together. So Orange leaving is not just a good thing. In fact, I think I see it more as of a bad thing. By now, I am independent from Orange, of course, and I stopped watching his Twitch stuff or his Twitch streams, and also I was not that interested in his very irregular upload on War Thunder. And don't confuse this with backstabbing a dead dog. No, this is me being very honest about it. I always had my line, okay, of looking at things by playing them and by looking, okay, this tank, this plane struggles, why? And coming up with a proper argumentation. While Orange always tried to look at a bigger picture. But even in the bigger picture, we disagreed very often. Funnily enough, we also agreed on many things when we talked in privacy. And again, it's privacy, so I will not mention what we actually talked about. I think this is something that I owe him. And again, he has taught me a lot. Okay, without him saying, hey, you're doing this wrong and that wrong, I would not have improved in the same way that I'm actually, standing right here as a YouTuber. There would be a lack of, it begins with little things like the thumbnails, which I have just reckoned is really important. If you make a semi-clickbaity thumbnail, for example, with my DuckTalks number 47, I guess, with the AP versus APDS, that attracted so many people. And so many people watching this video compared to other DuckTalks. And, I have not really changed anything in the way that I talk about stuff and, editing them. With this being the exception with some, if I don't forget it, timestamps. However, Orange has also broken a lot of promises. And he has left a lot of people hanging in the air by waiting for promised stuff. Where are his guides? Where are his educational videos? Where are the videos that matter for the little guy that he sometimes pretended are important as well? And where are his YouTube recommendations? The only few guys that he recommended for all intents and purposes were mostly other people that think the same way that he does. And most of those other YouTubers that he mentioned already have a not insignificant player base as far as I'm aware, or fan base or subscriber base. And at the start of my channel, he actually recommended me from time to time, and you might not really feel the significance of that. But if you suddenly have a spike in your subscriber count of 21 per day, which is you know, nothing unspectacular nowadays, because the more you grow, the more you grow. He actually recommended me, like, in the beginning of my YouTube channel, and thank you for that. The same goes, by the way, to Mike Goes Boom, and also to Many Miles Away, amongst others. And the thing is, this is a good kickstart. This allowed me to reach 1,500 subscribers under a year in a niche that is, you know, or in a topic area that is very small. I mean, we're talking about a free-to-play title, we're talking about War Thunder, and we're talking about realistic gameplay, and we're talking about tank and plane comparison and so forth. That is what my channel is about, amongst other things. But, you know, to reach a huge amount of subscribers where there is already so much competition of other YouTubers that for all intents and purposes have better editing skills and so forth, is not that easy. And that allowed me to go into the Gaijin Partnership Program, which further enhanced the stuff because I had easier access to, for example, the Italians and the French, and I could request high-tier stuff and so forth, and could have easily, you know, shown you that without grinding through, you know, tanks and planes that I don't need to show you to. And this is, you know, saving me time and so forth. And it all comes down back to the Orange Doom. And when finally he made this last Twitch clip, you know, after the duel he lost because of ping and server issues, I thought a lot of the stuff was very hypocritical, and where I just have a point at Orange and say, don't be that guy, please. Because, you know, for all intents and purposes, I've invested a lot of time into my YouTube channel. I've invested a lot of time in building up my own community, which I'm glad for. And I have to say, most of you guys are, you know, really great. You provide me with content to go through. You provide me with, you know, comments to think about and so forth. And you're mostly nice, you know, except that minor, very local minority. But I guess you cannot have over 7,000 people as your subscribers, with some of them being sometimes salty and so forth, or disagreeing on a very big magnitude, let's put it that way. And when he then said, yeah, and I can't quote Orange here, right, because I don't have it on top of my head, but he basically says that he can't watch my videos because, you know, after me saying, like, for the 5th time Russian bias, he has turned down the video. I think he hasn't watched some of my videos at all. And when there is the evidence from the game stats themselves that a tank is just better in a certain department, it happens to be a Soviet tank, and I just have to have the experience myself, and I have it by playing throughout all the nations, and I just think that Soviet tanks are very easy to use. And you know, I was right about the I-6, which is still a phenomenally good premium tank. Then should I lie to people? And to interpret that as me saying Russian bias, come on, Orange. I mean, I've expected better of you. And at this point in time, I was glad that I actually have turned around and gone away from Orange months and months before that. And he loved to bash on me a little bit once in a while. And yeah, we had a good laugh about certain things like vehicle. I know, but you know, it's not my original language and I don't study it. So, first of all, I wish Orange the best of luck for the future. Second of all, he fucking needs it. And third of all, now we are looking at a big gap in content throughout War Thunder. I mean, again, he was the big Twitch streamer. All other Twitch streamers are either very irregular or are still very small. And I love to watch Twitch, okay? But also for the competitive side, Orange was one of the few guys that actually promoted it on a big scale. And some of his videos and some of his Twitch streams were dedicated to it. And I just can't be bothered with the competitive side after my E100 tournament. And he called me, yeah, you're just butthurt and so forth. Yeah, I have the E100, but I would never go for it ever again. because that was just outright bullshit. And he never played that tournament, so he doesn't know what, or he never knew what I was talking about. Because when he played the tournament, it was different. So am I sorry for him leaving War Thunder? To a certain degree, yes. But then at the end, it was his own fault. And suddenly to mention all the faults within War Thunder that I've talked about months ago with him in videos and so forth, and he's saying, you know, blah blah blah, and you don't know what the other person's you know, ping is and so forth, and suddenly he falls for itself, okay? And so yeah, Orange was a bit arrogant. On the other hand, you know, he's still very young. I mean, yeah, I'm just a few years older, but nevertheless, he's still very young. He still has to learn. And the biggest lesson that Orange has to learn is that he still has to learn. He was a very damn good player, but he also had very different points of view. And you have to respect that. You have to respect his effort. But you also have to be aware that his solutions for changes within War Thunder were not always the very best. And that is a very important message. And that now brings us to another topic somewhat related to Orange. So, yeah, let's talk about that title that I just achieved last week, and that is God of War. God of War, that is a title that I indirectly and directly worked for like nearly 5 years. And it needs you to destroy 100,000 vehicles. Player control. However, there is a multiplier in realistic ×2, and I switched over to realistic. And you know, Orange has this title for like, I don't know, half a year or so. And a long time I was ahead of him in pure kill count. And also when we, you know, compared the progress of those tanks. And Orange achieved it, and he said it himself, by, you know, spamming CAS and doing the rocket snipes. And that was again a reason why he was so salty about it, because this, for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, easy mode, you know, to go into a plane that's fully upgraded and just spam rockets. And I think one of his games was 21 kills. Yeah, but like, I don't know, 20 of those kills were like with CAS. So, ooh. And you know, it's still skill to aim those rockets. It's still, you know, somewhat of a rare occasion that there are so many enemy targets on the battlefield. But I digress. The thing is, I played a lot of arcade where there is no multiplier of that, because in realistic every kill counts as double. And yeah, Orange spammed it and I didn't. I mean, I barely scratched 1,000 kills with CAS because I'm not interested in CAS. I know how it's done, I know how to improve on it, but I just simply have no interest. Again, this is a difference between me and Orange. And yeah, in the background you might see the battle when I was achieving it in the 100 with a 75mm heat shot on a ZSU 57-2. And then also later my 100,001 kill with a turret shot on an IS-6, which was deeply satisfying. But the horror of playing with the 100 in the current meta was just absurd. Like, no. Last year, before the introduction of tier 6 and so forth, I excessively played the 100 to grind for the KP set. At least at first I tried, and I just couldn't reach. Like, there were like 5 games where I made no kills at all, and this pay to win or pay to pen object 120 was just drifting all over the place and just penning me with the heat shell or the APDS in from the best angles through the side skirts and the hull while being heavily angled. It's just disgusting. The tank is just so slow, the main cannon is just so bad, so unreliable. Even with the smoke spam and the heat FS or the heat spam from the 75mm, believe me, the 100 is no longer worth it. If you ever have dreamt of getting the mouse or the 100, it's just so painful the compression, the power creep, it's just so disgusting. I just literally, for like the last 10 kills, I was literally thinking about, you know, should I do it in a Russian tank? Should I go into a low tier vehicle? Because there is no limitation at which tier you do it. And when I finally got this kill, I was just so glad. So, at higher tiers in particular, it's just such a campy meta. It's just such a ambush playstyle of enemies and your own team, and just a potato truck that gets raced into the capture zone, captures it, bails out, and bombs you in a plane. It's just disgusting. No, it's literally disgusting. But now I have it. And after I achieved God of War, I was like, I had this feeling like when you end a series of a good TV show, or when you, for example, watch the last minute of Game of Thrones for an episode, for example, you have this feeling, now what? Well, there is one title, not a title, but a challenge that I really love, and this is Survivor Mark IV. And currently, you might have noticed that in some of my tank reviews, I show the result screens, and I always say, look, I also got Survivor. Survivor is a title that I think I value a lot, especially at higher tiers. And so, with the Survivor, you know, the reward is tiny, at 10,000 silver lines and 500 free research points. Yeah, it's not worth anything. But I have 535 times achieved this challenge out of 700 times necessary for the Mark IV. So after 5 years of playing, I just got it 535 times. It's much easier to achieve at lower tiers, I have to give it that. And it means you need at least 5 kills, you need to have the most kills on your team, and you need to survive the battle, and you have to be the one with the most kills and the highest score on your team. So hence why it's so difficult to achieve the Survivor, and not a lot of people seem to go for it. So that is left to do, and that now brings me to the last point. Not the last point for the video, obviously, despite being already 42 minutes in. It's gonna be a long dub talks, and that has to do with I'm a bit tired of playing War Thunder as of late, and you know, I'm running into the danger of just you know, making a break again, and I don't mind to, you know, more and more leave there a gap in my daily upload schedule. I mean, I have no schedule, but it's like, what can I make a video about today? Or, oh look, I had this nice battle, let's see if I can make a video out of it. And there is an increased expectation of me, you know. Every match that I play must be an ace gameplay, and every match that I play must be at high tiers, and I just don't feel like it. Top tier with the KP set and the MBT 70 and the T64, it's just so boring. It's point and click, and oh, you don't have AP FSTS, bad for you, you have to die as long up until the point that you have it. Okay, and I'm like, really, that's all? Fun. And yeah, I'm not really excited about this top tier gameplay. But if I play then lower tiers, you know, it's seal clubbing. And even if I point it out, it's like, oh, shame on you, Napalm. And the response of the community. Then also no changes that are highly necessary within the game. No changes at all if we talk about RRB for years. And you just play the same stuff over and over again. By the way, one reason why I don't play too many Russian aircraft is because they're so boring to play. And it's also so boring to play against Soviets. I mean, look at how the maps are designed, what are the ground targets, and no, it's not fun. It's not fun to play with the Soviets. They're just outright boring. They're highly efficient. You get all the wins and all the kills that you want, but it's boring. And more and more goes into the direction of, you know, the lack of additional maps for RRB. And no, those extended tank RB ground forces maps do not count, especially with the, you know, lazy kind of, you know, where the bombing points are and where the ground units are, and it's always the same. I miss some sort of flavor, like on Norway, whether are the patrol boats coming in, whether it's this U-boat bunker with the huge amount of SBA, the destroyer flotillas, that is some sort of special flavor. This is why I personally love Norway, because the landscape is different, the air is cool and fresh, so my engines don't overheat. It's simple, yet very diverse, and I love that. And when I look at maps like I don't know, Sinai or Second Battle of El Alamein, or how this RRB map is called. Well, it's a big plain desert, and then some part is the tank RB map. 2 airfields, thump, 3 bombing points each, thump, and then also a few ground targets, distributed so ground attackers have to do something else. And the fighting area is directly over the ground attacker area. So extremely boring. I despise the map. There is no flavor to it. And yes, the ground is important for planes as well, from not just an aesthetic standpoint, but also important for orientation and also having a good feeling about the match. It's really difficult to explain, but it's important. And even Sicily has more character than those artificially enlarged tank RB maps, which do not count. I miss the flavor of other maps, and some maps have just disappeared out of the rotation. For example, why did Gaijin remove, Ruhr? Again, one of the great maps in the game. That was something else than just brown and dark green. It was actually a pretty fresh map, to be honest, and again a lot of action going on, and I loved this. But now I haven't played Ruhr in a very long time, aside from the very small version at reserve tiers. And at the moment, War Thunder is pretty silent. Okay, there is no thunder, there is no epicness for me personally, and I mean, it's a good thing because I have everything in the game, which is always a nice thing to have, and everything unlocked that you can possibly research. Again, now I can go back to the topic of spading stuff at lower tiers of, from tier 1 to tier 4. I can also try out different things, revisit certain vehicles that I didn't have a look at again, and refresh my horizon and so forth, which a lot of people that criticize me are not doing, by the way. And also the response of certain peoples of the community. This was also amongst many points, one of the points why I in the beginning was hesitating to begin with YouTube. People just losing their minds about stuff that you do, even though it's more or less thought through. And I'm a bit tired of playing War Thunder, and it's not the lack of content, but the lack of interest in old stuff within War Thunder at the hands of Gaijin. Let's put it that way. So for example, the last big changes was the spalling damage or shrapnel increase when an armor-piercing shot enters your tank. And obviously that was done in conjunction with the French. And the French desperately need that. But that was also again a very welcome buff for the British low to high to mid-tier tanks, tier 4, where the 20 pounder with the stock armor-piercing shell. Also some of the Soviet tanks with the solid stock shell. Same goes for the Americans. And so this was a very nice change. And that was just a change because Gaijin again had to play the new stuff for themselves to test it out, hopefully, and to say, they don't have a single APHE shell from rank 3 onwards, I guess. And so the high tier gameplay could be a bit uninteresting. I mean, imagine they having all the old spalling damage output, with the exception of the 120mm, which was buffed like a year ago with the increased penetration and the increased spalling damage on the M103, which the French used the same type of gun and ammunition for all intents and purposes. And then every tank would play like the MX-30 1972. Very frustrating. Not bad, good mobility and so forth, and also spotting mechanic and whatnot, but when you actually shoot at an enemy, highly, highly annoying. And thankfully Gaijin has come around to do this. But there are so many other tanks, so many other nations throughout the battle ratings that need more attention. And I know it's a difficult task to keep track of around about 1,000 vehicles in the game, including tanks and planes, at the hands of Gaijin. And I know that new content is what pays the bills. I know that. But what about bringing old players back, or players that, hesitate to start War Thunder because of all this stupid stuff that's going on in the game that people complain about? If you would bring them back, that would have so many positive side effects. In my opinion, it would increase the short-term income of Gaijin. It would secure the mid-term survivability of the game. And we are not in a desperate state at the moment. It's okay-ish, but then again, it's winter. You need to have a high player count, actually higher than we actually have it. And for this daytime, it's now 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Just 50,000 people. It should be 100,000 for what the game is capable. And again, it's so much wasted potential. And then just grind down on this topic at the hands of Gaijin. And it's just unnecessary and in some respects lazy, and in my opinion some of the devs just don't play the game where it's necessary that they play it, if they play it at all. And I've made enough rants, I've made enough videos about it, and there is so much that I could rant about, but are you guys interested in watching it? Does it bring me new subscribers? Is that fun? Is that what you want to see when you come back from work or from school and you sit down in front of the PC, or you want to listen to this at a podcast? I don't think so. So you are forced in a general direction, and I think sometimes as of late it's better to just make a break. To make a break in terms of releasing videos, a break in terms of making content that you don't enjoy to make. I think this is the big question. Now we have to talk about Italian tanks and rework of autoloaders, and why I think it's necessary. So this topic comes a little bit out of the blue for you, but Gaijin has did it again. What do you mean? Well, thrown away an advantage. One of the few nations of tanks that are implemented in War Thunder, but not in World of Tanks, are the Italians. So people might have been interested. Now, Wargaming has come around to announce the Italian nation and one of their premium vehicles, and I still watch, certain World of Tanks YouTubers, for example, Quickie Baby and the Mighty Jingles and Second Flags and so forth. And the quintessence is that we have basically Italian tanks in War Thunder already, but those are 2 premiums, and they just don't cut it. And it's the very first time that Gaijin went this wargaming route of releasing premium content without there being anything to research in the normal tech tree. And this is something that just repels me a little bit when thinking about it. So I mean, it's not just that the French are now the nation that got implemented both with the aircrafts and with the tanks. I see that some of the tanks are also from another nation. I get that. Same with the planes, and so we are approaching an hour. It's not just the a not insignificant amount of the vehicles are just copy and paste. I mean, think about the planes. There is nearly an entire line of American planes, which are good, by the way, and are necessary for the cast potential. But, it robs a little bit the flavor out of those planes. Nevertheless, let's go back to the Italian tank. So, for so many patches now, we haven't seen any additions to the Italians, and they need it. They need cast potential for the planes. They need a bit more flavor for the planes overall, although the fighters are good. I love them. This is a bit like the Germans should behave in terms of controllability. But I digress. Let's go to the tanks. If Gaijin finds it impossible to make a tech tree even with the minimum amount of necessary vehicles, then why have they implemented the premium tanks? For what purpose? And that brings me again to the beginning, because now it's Axis versus Allies. The Allies have everything and even more, with under-tiered vehicles throughout the battle ratings. And then, you know, there are the Axis, which are like, yeah, Italian planes are nice. Japanese planes are even nicer. We have some, you know, very nice and spicy tanks, like the whole reproduction and prototype. But other than that, you know, some tanks, some tank lines, some battle rating areas, they just lack it. And yeah. But with Italian tanks, there was another announcement, and that is a very unique reload mechanism for wargaming tanks. And funnily enough, that makes sense. What I'm talking about here is that we have, for all intents and purposes, funnily enough, for the Japanese, an autoloader called the Chiri 2, sitting at a battle rating of 5.0, and that has a 2-shot autoloader. And then it has to reload for 13.8 seconds for my expert crew, or 13 seconds for an ace crew. And that is a long time for a 75mm gun, despite it being really good, I have to say. But this is where now it becomes apparent how different and how awful actually the autoloading mechanism within War Thunder is. Okay, for example, with the Chiri 2, if you go into battle and you have 2 shots, okay? By the way, I think it was once 3 shots, something like that, but I digress. You shoot 1 shot, you kill that tank with the first shot, and then you know, for example in an endgame scenario, there is just 2 enemy tanks left. And yeah, you know that they are both close together and you have to jump on them, but you just have 1 shot in the barrel. But the other shot that is now on the breach, actually ready to be filled from the normal ammo storage or ammo racks within the tank, no, the gunner doesn't reload it. So you have to fire the shot to reload 2 shells, and that takes you 13 seconds minimum, and that is a long time. And what Wargaming announced here is that you now have to just simply expect a normal reload rate for the first shot that you fire, and if you fire the second shot, that reload increases exponentially, but you have 3 shots with the normal autoloader reload time. So it's in your control how fast you fire and how you do it, but that might give you the advantage in a very critical situation if somebody wants to rush you, but you have enough bursting power to take him down. But if you are in a consistent fight, just wait for the reload of that 1 shell. And that is how I think the autoloaders in War Thunder also should work. I mean, when we look at the French, for example, the MX-30 or 13 series of tanks, they have 75mm autoloader with 12 rounds in 2 drums. And if you look at it, for example on the MX-13, you have 12 shots per minute. So that is all 5 seconds you can fire a shot. That is pretty quick, especially for the battle rating, for the post-penetration damage, for the caliber, and for the penetration power that it has. It makes this light tank really fun to play. However, let's say you just have 3 shots left, okay? And you know that you will not engage an enemy tank for a while because there is nothing left on the map, or you know where the next enemy is, and you want to reload. You cannot press R and force the reload. No, you have to fire the 3 remaining shots of the autoloader to refill the complete autoloader. And the question is, what prevents, you know, from a mechanical standpoint of view or from a realistic standpoint of view, that reload? Because it makes a lot of noise. It is then kind of obvious to certain players, hey look, he has just fired some shots randomly, I think he's reloading, you know, because that actually prevents this kind of mind tricks that you can play with sometimes. Hey look, I'm just reloading, I haven't fired at you while I have this opportunity, come around to kill me, to catch me off guard. Oh, I just had 1 shot left in the magazine. So it's a bit weird, and I think we need an overhaul. And as far as I know, there are at least some Italian tanks that also rely on some sort of breach auto-loading mechanism, if I'm not mistaken. Let me know in the comment section if you know about this. And so we need an overhaul of this reload mechanic within War Thunder, which is lacking since the closed beta, or for example to exchange the shells. Like for example, I am in a Leopard, okay, and I have suddenly the sight of a tank and he's not aware of me, but I just have the turret, okay, and I can penetrate the turret with the APDS that I have loaded, but I want to penetrate, for example, the turret with a HES shell to do more damage. What it needs is, for example, also that I need to fire the shot to reload another ammunition type, and that is also highly annoying, and I would love Gaijin to rework that. So, and this is now 1 hour of talking right now, and now let's come to the questions. So, first question comes from Portuguese Eagle. I would like to hear your opinion on the possible vehicles and if the international tech tree would work. That's a tough question, to be honest. I'm not quite sure I can answer that. So first of all, international tech tree, it has been a topic of certain talks and speculations since the beta of War Thunder tanks, and the idea behind is that certain nations lack just the variety throughout the tiers to make their own tech trees, and if you would unite them, you have some sort of international tech trees. That would offer the possibility, for example, for some Romanian aircraft which are considered to be excellent. By the way, that description is for every plane in the game in some sort of way. So many excellent aircraft, so yeah, which is more excellent, so to speak. But jokes aside, also for some Swedish tank destroyers, maybe, to see at least some of them in the game, that would be highly interesting. And I think that a lot of the nations could be represented in that international tech tree. It could offer the possibility for one of the largest tech trees, but then the question is, on which side would they fight on? The Allies, the Axis, Independent, Mixed Matchmaker? I don't know. Also, how many tanks and planes from already existing vehicles in the game would we see? For example, Bf-109s in the service of the Spanish, or so many vehicles that were given to the Israelis, for example, when that nation was founded in 1984, if I'm not wrong. So international, those are a lot of nations to be put in, for example, with the Chinese, they got a lot of the stuff from the Soviets, which is highly interesting, and with the with some vehicles we might have already seen that in game. If I just may look into the reward section of the Soviets, what do we have here? We have the Type 65 SPAA and also the Type 62. So already 2 Chinese versions that we have in the game. So I think it could be one of the most diverse, most interesting tech trees in the game, especially when we then think about the Navy, because there I have absolutely no idea, and this might be a huge surprise. And maybe Gaijin is already working on that, because at some point they have to come up with something that draws the attention of so many people. And they already have said they will not implement any major nation. That just leaves the international tech tree as a plausible option. So interesting question. So next question comes from Colin Thorneycroft. Here's a real question: why does the KV-1 have the sound effect of carapace cabin with armored tracks from Crossout? That is a question that I cannot answer you. Simple as that. However, I can talk around a bit, First of all, that Crossout uses a lot of the sound files from War Thunder, or there is the possibility that they do so, I guess, because I never have played Crossout, is a logical thing, as both games are developed by Gaijin. Next thing is that I'm using a sound mod, which you'll find the link in the video description, and so I cannot listen to the original sound of the KV-1. However, Also, Gaijin is using some of outstanding sound files that they recorded themselves, obviously. However, they are also using some sound files from I don't know, from a generic website or something like this. For example, the gun sound of the German 128mm on both the Maus Jagdtiger, for example, also the E100 and the Sture Emil, but also the German Z20. It's very generic. I have heard this in other games as well, where I watched videos and I thought, have I left open War Thunder? Why is there a Jagdtiger firing in the background? Oh no, oh, it's this item. Ah. For example, XCOM 2, that was a video that I watched from Jingles like a year ago, where they were, where they was shut down, or they had an emergency landing and they fought their way through, and they had to destroy some sort of beacon that prevented them from starting again, something like this. And this made the exact same sound as the gun of the Jagdtiger, and I was heavily disturbed. And since then I heard it in so many Hollywood movies and so forth. So it seems to be a widely used sound effect, not necessarily for a gun, but it made me think. Next question is a very long question from Bauer9R, and I will cut it down to the simple question if Gaijin should rework the damage model of basically fuel tanks. And it's more about Soviet tanks, because for example T-34s and KV-1s, they have the fuel tanks on the side and they absorb a lot of shrapnels, but the same goes for the higher tier Soviets from the front, like the T-54 series and ongoing, where a lot of the damage is absorbed by the fuel tank throughout all ammunition types: heat, hash, APHE, AP even. And if this needs a rework and so forth, the answer is, well, sometimes yes. If you think about a side shot on a KV-1 with a gun that has APHE, then the fuse delay should allow the shell to go through the fuel tank and then explode inside of the enemy tank, and then go off and then delete the enemy like any sort of enemy tank. With hash, I can fully understand it, because it should absorb the shrapnels, so that is logical. But that it absolutely 100% absorbs APDS, APFSTS and armor-piercing shots, it's I don't know which kind of historical background that has, if fuel tanks are really that efficient. And we're not talking even about, then the fuel leaking into the fighting compartment, eventually being set on fire, and actually should be able to kill the tank, not even mentioning those small details. But yeah, this is one of the things that really makes fighting the Soviets sometimes harder than it actually should be, those fuel tanks. And it goes, for example, this is not just Russian bias, this is actually a technical problem which we all have also on the KPZ-70, where the most efficient damage absorption is to angle your tank so that the first thing that the enemy hits on the hull is your fuel tank that absorbs a lot of stuff. If it gets set on fire, you can extinguish it 2 times. No big deal about this. So yeah, I think there should be a rework. Then Yana Abramian, sorry about this, asks, can I ask you a question? You just did. So next question. By the way, if you find it a bit annoying that I sound so strange between the questions, yeah, I have to stop the recording, look up the question, because I'm not writing them down and I don't have 2 monitors. And you also have to read through 300 comments, so it's kind of work to do. But next question comes from Chief1964, and he asks if what I would expect from this ammunition rework, and if I would prefer it to a characteristic based on the highest level of degree of realism. Well, it's a bit complicated. So if we talk about excessively accurate models of simulations of penetration mechanisms of shells, then it would be really complicated, and that would take up a lot of how should I say it, a lot of processing power. And if you fire at somebody with an SPA, I mean, imagine the M163, for example, firing at something, or the Wirbelwind. There are 80 shells that have been calculated, and that's just one tank and one target. Also, that would then lead to kind of grind down of armor. If you have, for example, a 100mm plate and multiple shells impact in near vicinity of each other, in quick succession, the armor plate would just deform, and at some point a shell would impact a place where there was a shell before, and so that is an amount of realism that I guess is not really necessary for a game. But what is necessary is if Gaijin really screwed up penetration mechanisms and penetration values for certain ammunition types, APDS rounds, and also APHE normalization, the capping, and so many more things that the characteristics are wrong, and also the post-penetration damage. It needs a big rework, and they really are interested in it, as far as I know, and I hope I will answer with that the question of Hapalula, where I found out about this ammunition rework. First of all, they said they would want to do it, and they should do it, and it's necessary to do it, and when they have all the documents. As far as I can tell, or as far as I was told, they even don't have the real stats of the L7 gun. Okay, so they assumed how it should work. Interestingly, they made it in a way that a lot of Soviet tanks just get away with it, with the stock shell, not with the heat shell. And it's hard to come by certain documents because those tanks are still somewhat in service throughout certain nations and so forth. Really broad topic. Next question comes from Aristo81, aka Myung Karong. I hope I pronounced it right. What do you think of Gaijin giving the Germans in the tech tree the T-55 AMZ or DDR era? Well, kind of the Germans in the current state, I think, would be happy to accept those tanks. There is a bit of a gap in the battle rating area, and performance-wise, those tanks could just do what Soviet tanks usually do: troll the enemy and one-shot them. I would happy to see that, and then we could really see if German players are really that bad, if they face off Soviet tanks versus German tanks, which are basically the same. So I would be highly interested in that idea. It's a possible solution, and I'm really wondering why Gaijin is not doing this. Maybe in our next patch, who knows. Next question comes from Anthony Yui. Napalm, I understand, and so forth and so forth. Yeah, he asks about what I think about the T-30 being added for the Americans, which has apparently a long-barreled 155mm gun. Miles told me about this tank, and apparently this thing fired hash. Ooh, that's a big hash shell, and if it would work reliably, I think I have nothing against the addition of this tank. I mean, there's already so much crap in the game. It entirely depends on the battle rating. I mean, what is one more tank being added for the Americans that can one-shot stuff? It would be a fun and interesting concept, because that thing has a big gun and it carries armor with it. I mean, if I think roughly about T-29 and T-34 as comparison, just with a 155mm barrel, it could be interesting, but it wouldn't be a game changer. Battle rating, I would assume, just out of the hip, I would say 7.3, 7.7 at least. Yeah. Then Nissan U, Napalm, Wall of Tanks is going to get a graphic update pretty soon, making it look on par with AAA games like Battlefield 1 or Call of Duty World War II. Do you think that Gaijin will do anything to their graphics engine to improve the visuals in this game? I suggest you check out the footage, blah 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 blah. I have seen it. I've seen, again, I follow Quickie Baby and so forth, and I think it's good that World of Tanks is, gearing up, that they improve the visuals that they have. And I agree that certain parts of War Thunder don't look that pretty. I mean, look at the older maps, look at certain details on planes, they look awful. And those are relicts from the beta phase that Gaijin again never has come around to deal with, which is an entirely topic of its own, and it's again a red line throughout all of it. But nevertheless, first of all, it will not change the gameplay in my opinion. Render distance, RNG, aiming time, missing shots, RNG values for penetration, and damage output. No, thank you. So World of Tanks can look as pretty as it looks, but if the gameplay is still so pay to win with the recent additions of, I don't know, Patriot, Scorpion, and the Chrysler and so forth, that's just bullshit. The game itself is not enjoyable. I mean, I can play old games such as Stronghold or Anno 1503 or Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun, or hell, even Crisis, and I have fun, because those games are somewhat, in some way, shape or form, balanced. Crisis is a big question mark, but nevertheless, there is balance. But with World of Tanks, they just ruined their own game. And they also have a lot of compression issues. I mean, if something like the so-called Mauerbrecher as a premium tank that has like 2 times the armor of the Tiger II is now considered to be bad, well, where do you put the Tiger II? Nobody talks about this tank in that game. And, people just go around, oh, it's just a Tiger II. By the way, that is a problem of old tanks, because they never get replaced or reworked. And then suddenly a big power creep happens. And within War Thunder, they have a very easy tool, which is called battle rating. Nothing is written in stone. It's just a change of a few numbers, and you could, breathe fresh air into the game. But Gaijin doesn't do that. I hope they will do it soon, but that's a hope that's going on for a long time. Yeah. Then Hammered Front AUT asked, hello Napalm, can you recommend the Leo 1A1 at the moment? The answer is no. It gets up-tiered into 9.0 all the time. It is not a particularly bad tank. It's the first one with a stabilizer, so nothing bad about it, but the competition is just too tough and awful stock grind, and from the front you cannot do a lot against the T64A. With your stock APDS, aiming for this pixel and that pixel, the hash is completely useless unless you hit the lower plate, but even then, it might ricochet or not penetrate due to the angle. Same goes for the heat shell. And the stock grind, no. Swiss Cowboy 87 asks, Napalm, what do you think about mixed teams? Would that might help balancing the game if Germany could team up with every nation? So this is somewhat that people call Arcade Plus. That's the first thing. The second one is, I've talked about this quite a lot with the Japanese playing together with their light tank branch, and also the Americans. And it also would be nice to see if the Americans would really how they would end up against the British, which is a combination that, as far as I can recall it, I have never seen in the game. It would be interesting, and it's already in the game in some shape or form, but sometimes the teams that result from that are either overpowered or underpowered. Rarely they are really balanced, and then we still have the snowball effect that many people just dislike. So next question comes from Will the Beast MG. Quick question, please answer. Would you like to see the M246 Sergeant York? I'd love it at 7.7. And I had no idea what it was, and he answered that it is apparently an M48 chassis with two 40mm L70 Bofors in the turret, and he compares it to a Coelian much, so it would be nice as an SPA. And it's somewhere standing, from how I can interpret it, after having played the MX-13 DCA, that it's somewhere standing between a Coelian and also some of the higher tier SPAs, or the ZSU-57-2, something like this, and that it would go nicely alongside the M48 and M60. Interesting concept. I have no idea if this is already in work or work in progress, something like this. We have to wait for it. Interesting concept, but it will not be a game changer, especially because you have difficulties at that battle rating dealing with most opponents speed-wise and going to their flank. You know, think about the big light Panzer, and if that tank is good at 8.7, so you can put it into perspective. Tech Priest asks a question: do you plan to make a little tutorial video for German tankers? How to play certain maps, where to aim on problematic tanks, etc. to help people work around the numerous flaws and maybe bump up the win rate to 50%. Well, you know, all that stuff is already covered in my videos, throughout the videos. Where to aim at certain tanks, look up my tank reviews. If you want to see how a tank is played, I played it maybe. How to play a map, it depends from which side you're on, which game mode you have. If you have 1 or 3 capture zones, you cannot really make it. I know where you're going, but the majority of things that you want to see is already in my videos. So I'm sorry about it, but I think it is too much of a topic. It's a never-ending story within War Thunder, and there are bigger problems than just me making a tutorial, because that is a big problem. A lot of the people that, you know, play War Thunder don't look into YouTube. So one of the big things that you as a person, not just Tech Priest, but all of the people that are watching this and still are, you know, somewhat awake after me talking for over 1 hour, is just think like it as of a how should I say it? You need to drag people into YouTube, not necessarily to my channel, but so that they are aware, hey look, I can watch videos to improve, tips and tricks, tutorials and so forth. It's all over the internet, but nobody looks at it. Everybody is on the internet, but nobody looks up the questions. I mean, I've done enough videos in the past so that there is a lot to learn from them, hopefully, and people are just not watching them. And the few thousand subscribers that I have are mostly already subscribed to Michael's Boom, to Many Miles Away, to the Orange Doom, and to other YouTubers. And they also make videos, so a big part of the videos that I make is already out there somewhere, okay? And the people that are usually watching YouTube are not the worst tankers in the first place, because they are then aware, oh look, I have to look at this, I have to look at that, and so forth. So I don't know if a video series, a new one, aside from my 20 video series that I already have, would be worth it. So then the next semi-question comes from Florent X Torellman, and he talks about the big HE shells, for example on the Japanese Horo and the ISU 152 HE shells, and that you can almost kill any tank in the game when, you know, shooting, for example, somewhat like a shot trap and so forth. So first of all, those shells are pretty difficult to aim, especially at long ranges. With the Horo, which is a bit slow, sluggish, and, you know, tank destroyer shape, you know, it's more like trolling, but you cannot really rely on that. But I agree, those big HE shells are powerful, and when they are powerful, I mentioned them in my tank reviews, from 120mm onwards, HE shells are actually usable for splashing the turret, going through the roof of the tank and igniting ammunition, for example. This is a valid option when you are in your German tank with a 128mm and you shoot the turret front of a Soviet tank with HE and you splash down, and you do more reliable damage than with the AP-HE shell. Yeah. So yeah, that is true. Big HE shells are powerful, but not every tank is viable to use them. IS-4, if you know how to aim them with the long reload, and funnily enough, the Tiger II is immune to the 122mm HE because it has 36mm of penetration, but the roof armor of the Tiger is 40mm. German bias! German bias! Tiger II is fine, you just said it yourself. Yeah. Next question comes from Oirino. A question: when shooting a mouse-guided ATGM, isn't it possible to guide it in binocular mode? As far as I know, if you switch to the binocular mode after having fired the ATGM, it cuts the connection to the ATGM, so it then flies straight onwards towards the target. You can aim with the binoculars, for example over a hill, but you still have to launch it in either third-person mode, at close range for example, or in the gunner's side. And this is also if you misfired the ATGM, but you have to retreat, just put the binoculars and you can reverse into cover. So this is my best answer, I guess. Another interesting question comes from Danish Dynamite, and he asks me if there is practically any difference between the test drive and the real battles. So when you test drive a tank, you can shoot at some dummy AI tanks, and the big difference is that, you know, most of the time you stand still, you aim carefully, you shoot, and it's a very controlled environment, and you just hit the places that you aim, first of all. Then most of the armor is unangled, or you know, the enemy tank doesn't angle against you, for example, and also you have the time to correct your aim. You also you're not affected by ping or packet loss or bad connection also from the other player. It's a big difference. As for mechanics, what is the difference? Well, I guess the stock tanks have no upgraded crews, so with a better survivability, as James V.D. Bosch explained. That might be true. However, I don't think there are big mechanics. However, for planes, for example, in the test flight, you can use two different models of planes. First of all, the one that you have, and then also the how should I say, the custom. The vehicle modification is the reference model and the current model. That's the thing. And so if you then go into battle but you have selected the wrong thing in the test drive, you might feel like there is a difference, whereas you just have selected the, you know, wrong thing. Okay, so please keep that in mind. So the game mechanics don't change. For example, I think if you do a test shooting in a custom battle, it's in no way, shape or form different in its mechanical core than you do it in a real battle. That's the essence of it. Another interesting question comes from Il Torelli, and he talks about the damage output differences basically between 20 and 23mm cannons on one side and, for example, 50 caliber damage output on the other side. So I think the core essence here is that the high explosive damage is not really modeled as you might expect it in the game. For example, the German mine shells very often just spark off, while 50 cals a single hit seems to saw off your wing. That is highly frustrating, and you do not get any benefit for the disadvantages of big cannons like slow muzzle velocity, worse trajectory, less shell density in the air, less ammunition, less firing time, all the stuff. And you don't get this one-hit knockout that you expect from such cannons, especially against fighters. Against bombers, it's a bit of a different story, but nevertheless more or less the same. I think 50 cals are a bit overperforming, slightly overperforming, but then again certain plane damage models are weird. For example, the German Me410 is notoriously fragile, and just hilariously fragile as that, and a single hit, regardless of what you fire at it, will saw off the wing in most cases. I think that 20 and 23mm guns should be buffed a little bit with the HE damage. Funnily enough, the armor piercing damage is still very good. So when I tried my Yak 15, Yak 17s out, I used the API, armor piercing incendiary shells, and they did a lot of damage when hitting the fuselage. So it's about the armor piercing buff for the 50 cals and also for the all the belts in the game, but you don't shoot enough armor piercing shots per burst into an enemy plane with 20 or 23mm cannon than compared to 50 calibers. So this might give you the impression that there is something wrong with the 20 and 23mm guns, which there actually is. 23mm guns are nerfed and not very useful since the TU4 happened, and it nerfed every Soviet jet except for the TU4. Well done, Gaijin. Well fucking done. We are all happy about this change and the implementation of this very well thought through plane. Mixed Channel Game Productions asked, what do you think about the current map rotation? It sucks. I've talked enough about it. It's just absolute garbage. The lack of variety, and abandoned factory, abandoned factory, abandoned factory, abandoned factory. Next question, which is actually the last question, comes from Avian Aviator. Why are they called duck talks? Well, look at the first one. I wanted to give it a very spicy name, and duck talks is something really, really nice. It's also a bit of resemblance to DuckTales, which is a show that I loved as a kid. So that's it for me today, and we are wow, really? We're approaching 1.5 hours. Oh shit. Okay, that's it for me today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Please ask your question in the comment section below. Give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other in the skies and on the battlefields of War Thunder. Come on, just more seconds. And yep, 1.5 hours.